From the shadowy depths of the city, where justice and mystery intertwine, emerges a broadcast as daring and vigilant as the masked Avenger himself. You are tuned in to the Green Hornet Case Files, unveiling the legacy and cultural significance of one of the greatest crime fighters of all time. Now, let the adventure begin. Here are your hosts, Kory and Greg.
It's a good one.
Episode 25.
25.
Can you believe it?
I'm pretty stoked on it. This is closing in on a year.
It is, and we're working on that right now. Hey, everybody, I'm Greg.
And I'm Kory.
And we have a special guest we'll get to in just a minute. If she'd stop playing with her hair in the background, she's distracting me just a little bit. She's always distracted me, I got to tell you that. Hey, welcome to the Green Hornet Case Files, and episode 25, like Kory said, we are getting ready to celebrate a one-year anniversary of, 26, 27 episodes coming up really quick, and we have some special things planned for you if they come through, and I'm excited about tonight's podcast because the guest we have on.
Yeah, we're very, very, very lucky.
Yes, and so is she, but she doesn't know it yet.
So you wanted to bring up something that you posted earlier today.
I did. You know, we record the podcast a week, sometimes 2-3 days to a week in advance. And I think actually we're recording this one almost 2 weeks in advance of when it's going to air. And I didn't realize it until the last show that we talked about the costume, and we had Bill Morrison on from Futurama, that it was Van Williams' birthday on that Thursday, the 27th.
Yes,
and
we were very remiss.
It just, I hate it when that sort of thing happens. So, Van, happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Absolutely.
Wished I'd had that little piece of audio, Van, from the interview we did all those years ago. We should have cut that in there, too.
A little clip. Do that.
Yeah. Had a couple quick notes. You remember the show Banachek? Are you old enough, Kory, to have watched George Peppard doing Banachek?
So I did see it in reruns.
Okay.
I was an 80s kid. A-Team was one of my favorite things in the world. So George Peppard was always like, I watched everything that he was in.
Yeah. I had an email that came through, and I got to find the guy's name if I can here just really, really quick. And he sent a note and said, speaking of, we're talking about James McMahon is the guy's name. And, we're talking about the cultural significance of the Green Hornet. And he sent this note saying he was watching some Banachek, and all of a sudden he says, George Peppard is, the Boston-based freelance insurance investigator who solves these impossible thefts. And he says in one scene, a character is praising Banachek, telling him he's a combination of the Scarlet Pimpernel and Sherlock Holmes. And Banachek adds, not to mention the Green Hornet.
Heck yeah.
And I'm like, that's so cool. That is so very, very cool.
And we did that. We brought that up multiple times. We've looked and looked for different references to the Hornet, and that one never came up before. So that's a new one. That's awesome.
That's the first time I've heard that pop culture reference. And I mentioned Bill Morrison that had the little story about his $1,000 Green Hornet coat last episode. And I just had a note back from Bill, actually this morning, said, just listened, have posted the link on Facebook. Great episode, pal. Thanks for including me in the fun.
Very cool.
Very cool. Nice to have that. You want to introduce our guest and the topic for the show tonight here?
Well, so Greg and I were talking, and I came up with the thought that we talk about the cultural significance of the Hornet. He just mentioned it again, but the impact that brought most of us to the show, like those of us that didn't experience it on its first run, we came because of Bruce Lee.
Right.
And So I wanted to talk about how Kato has influenced culture as well. We always talk about the Hornet. We talk about Kato all the time, but what Kato brought to the table as far as character study, sidekick, guy that eclipses, and still a representation or a representative for Asian culture. And so it seemed like a topic that could be a whole lot of fun. And so I picked Greg's brain and said, "Hey, buddy, who could we talk to?" And you said,
Kelly who? That's not a joke. That's not a joke in there anyplace. But I thought immediately of Kelly who, and I had met Kelly, whether she remembers it or not. I got thrown out of my bedroom at Rod Roddenberry's house because Kelly was coming in to stay the weekend, and I had to sleep on the couch with the dogs. Hi, Kelly.
You remember they were big dogs, too.
And I'm not that big of a good guy, so.
That's so funny. Hi, guys. How are you?
Thank you, Kelly, for coming on here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Kelly, you started off early, and I didn't know this until I was going through and reading some bio stuff. Miss Teen USA 1985 in Wichita, Kansas.
Actually, no, Miss Teen, I competed and won in Miami.
Oh, okay.
Wichita was when I ran for Miss USA later. But the Miss Teen was almost 40 years ago to the date.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Just over 40 years ago.
Well, it stuck in my head because
something.
I moved out here 32 years ago, 33 years ago from Wichita.
Oh,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense because I ran in Miss USA in Wichita in 93.
Okay. And that's
home
about
of Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
That's all I remember about Wichita. And that it was in the middle of America, geographically, right? In the very middle of America, which makes it a great place to distribute drugs from.
Ooh.
That's what I learned about Wichita, Kansas.
Well, I didn't put that reference in there at all. So, okay.
Yeah.
So you started off early, though, because you were an inspiration. You were what, the first Asian teen, Miss Teen?
Yeah, the first Asian Miss Teen USA back in 1985. I mean, when I won that pageant, I didn't realize I was
it didn't mean
representing all of Asians. It wasn't even a part of my thinking back then. Because I grew up in Hawaii. I grew up in Hawaii where Asians are the majority. And so I never felt like I had to represent anybody but myself. And I didn't realize what a big impact that win had on, young Asians, across the country until I started traveling across the country and started speaking to people and how much, they would tell me how much it meant to them. And I had no clue at all.
I saw a bit of this. I don't know how much you remember that trip that we went out and we did a scuba dive on the Eureka oil rig platform. And that evening, the fellow that you went diving in, you and I were supposed to be buddied together, by the way. And I had never been in a blue water dive like that before. And it was
the coldest dive I've ever done, and I will never do another cold dive again.
I almost, and I've not told a lot of people this, I almost died. Rod and I were buddied together, and Rod took off on me, and I was wearing a dry suit. Our dry suits, remember, looked like Star Trek uniforms. And I had sand or something in my valve, and I couldn't get air into my suit, and I was drifting, deeper and deeper. Anyway, long story. But the guy you were teamed with was a guy named Bill Powers.
I know Bill. Yeah.
You know Bill. And then that
He's a master
evening,
diver, right?
Yeah, an instructor, I think.
Yeah.
That evening, and there you go, Bill. I just gave you a plug, okay? Power Scuba.
Yes.
San Diego. All right. You guys did was it The Cove? We did a documentary, played the documentary The Cove, and you and Bill did an on-stage Q&A thing after it was over with. And before dinner, or before the show, we did dinner, and all these people kept coming up to you saying how much you meant to them. And you being, I remembered this specifically because most of them were Asian.
Oh, wow. I do not remember that specifically, but that's awesome.
And
I'm always so touched when that happens. Seriously. Sometimes I'm like literally brought to tears. It seems so silly because it was not my intention at all that, I'm going to join this pageant and have this career in acting because I want to represent all Asians. I just wanted to have fun and do what I love to do. And I seriously did not expect to win that pageant at all. I did it because I was actually, I had a contract to model in Japan that summer. And the agents told me that if I won a pageant that they would be able to promote me better in Japan. And so I just ran in whatever pageant I could find that didn't have some talent that I had to do on stage.
What was your talent? What was your talent?
I didn't have a talent. That's why I looked for a pageant that didn't have one. And so I would have had to make something up. But anyway, so I was hoping to win the local pageant just so I could use that to perhaps make more money in Japan. But as part of my obligation after winning the local pageant, I had to run in the national pageant. And I just thought this is going to be fun. I hope I get to make the top 10 just so I could be seen on national television. And never thinking that I could possibly win. And in fact, before I even got on the plane, my mother told me, she said, now don't cry when you don't win because America is not ready for an Oriental Miss Teen USA.
Really?
And I was like, what are you talking about? Nobody thinks like that anymore. That's so old fashioned. This is 1985. I had no clue growing up in Hawaii, because we are the majority. So
of course.
It didn't even occur to me that somebody would even think that way. And I remember distinctly sitting in the theater watching the monitor while they were playing the prize package, the reel with all the prizes, and saying out loud, wow, whoever wins this is going to be so lucky. And I ended up being the luckiest one.
Do you still use the washer and dryer that they had?
Here's some interesting trivia. You know who was the host that year?
No.
It was Lorenzo Lamas.
Really?
Renegade fame.
Who exactly 10 years later, during the recording of the Miss Teen USA pageant 10 years later, I did a guest star on his show Renegade. And we were talking about how that night we were on set and we were like, hey, guess what? The Miss Teen USA pageant is going on tonight. And it was 10 years ago that you hosted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fantastic.
Isn't that so funny?
That is cool.
And then we worked together again on, what is that terrible thing where they make all of us unathletic old actors compete against one another? What is that thing called? That horrible thing that they made us do when they made us do like obstacle courses.
Hollywood Squares.
No, it wasn't Hollywood Squares. It was the one where they made us like
it was on
run
CBS,
and
yeah.
play basketball and And yeah, and all the guys, they made me do the longest run because all of the other guys had bad knees and bad backs and bad hips and whatnot. Yeah, it was terrible. I almost died doing that thing. Battle of the Network Stars.
Battle of
That's
the
what it was
Network
called.
Stars.
Yes.
See, I'm so old I can't remember anything anymore.
You're not that old, girl.
I just made 57, I'm proud to say.
I know.
Awesome.
Happy birthday, February 13th.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
very,
you.
Very welcome. I got you by 10 years, girl.
Woohoo!
Oh. Speaking of bad knees and everything else, what were you going to say, Kory? Did you have something?
I knew he was going to do that. So, getting back to our topic.
We had a topic?
Yeah, we wanted to talk about, I just was curious, is if the reach of the character of Kato ever got to you in Hawaii. Like, was it something that was ever appeared in the zeitgeist at all in those early 80s days?
Bruce Lee, you know.
Well, here's the thing. When I was growing up, when I was much younger, like back in the 70s, I remember watching a lot of Japanese shows in Hawaii. We would get Ultraman and Kamen Rider and what was the one I used to love so much? I mean, so we watched a lot of Japanese superheroes.
Cool.
And so it didn't. I mean, I don't remember. I think at that age when I was, like 6-7 years old watching all these Japanese shows, it didn't occur to me that there was not representation on television,
Right?
Because I watched Japanese, superheroes, live action superheroes. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started realizing the difference between local television and network television.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, where are all the Asian people? Also, my dad used to take us to Chinatown to go watch Bruce Lee movies and Jackie Chan movies.
Yeah.
Back in the day when they weren't really playing them in the US, I think. So we would have to go to the Chinatown theaters and watch, all the martial arts shows, martial arts films. So yeah, it wasn't until later that I started, as an adult, really, when I started realizing that there was no other representation out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What interests me is in talking, and if we're going back through again, we talked a little bit beforehand about Keye Luke. Keye Luke, who played Master Po on Kung Fu and was the original Kato in the 1940s Green Hornet movie serials. And before that had been, we've talked about Keye on the show before. Before that had been Number One Son on the old Charlie Chan films.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got to doing more digging in regards to this topic, I came up with a film, and I'll bash this name, but it's Tokotaro Hayashi, and his stage name at the time was Raymond Toyo, and he was Japanese American, was the original voice of Kato in 1936 when the radio program started. So there was representation at that point in time. And then you go back through and you look at Anna May Wong and Philip Ahn and Victor Sen Young and James Shigeta and, all these other great Asian actors that got to play Asian roles.
Mm-hmm.
And in weird situations like Keye Luke playing Number One Son against a couple of different guys who were not Asian at all. Charlie Chan, the actor, was Swedish to start with. So it had to be a tough row to hoe in those early days.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, I'm sure even when I wanted to move to Los Angeles and become an actor, my mother was terrified because there were so few actors on television that she didn't know that it was even possible for me to make a living. And it's difficult as an actor to make a living anyway, no matter what skin color you are. I just found out during the actors' strike that out of 160,000 actors in the Screen Actors Guild, only 4% make a living wage.
Wow. Oof.
So
doesn't surprise me in the least.
The odds are so stacked against you. It's no wonder, every Asian parent was like, you are a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, whatever, never an actor, never.
Earn a living.
Right. And I think if I hadn't won the Miss Teen USA pageant when I was 16 and been exposed to so much at that age and, won a big prize package, so I had some money to start life, to lean on. I don't think my mother would have let me do it. Mm-hmm. I asked her just a few years ago, because thinking about it, when I moved to Los Angeles, I was only 18 years old and I didn't know my head from my butt. And I remember asking my mom just a few years ago, how in the world did you let me do that?
Is mom still with us?
Yeah, she's the reason why I've moved to Vegas. I live in Las Vegas now because I came to be with my parents, my stepdad and my mom, and sort of start taking care of them. And
what was her answer? What was mom's answer?
She said, I had no choice. She said, you would have done it whether I approved or not. And she was absolutely right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what a hard road it must have been back in the day, before the late 80s, early 90s, when I started acting. When I started, there were only like 3 of us girls who were Asian in my age group. There was me, Tia Carrere, mm-hmm. and Tamlin Tomita.
Oh, yeah.
Remember
that were, working.
Yep.
So, and
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Lucy Liu wasn't on the scene yet. She was a bit younger,
Michelle Yeoh wasn't
I think.
in yet.
No, I mean, it was really, there were very few of us and there were very few Asian roles. So I think one of the things that my agents used to say was that they didn't see me as just an Asian actress, that they saw me as like an all-American girl. And I think that being Miss Teen USA really kind of helped that. And so they were really good about sending me out on auditions that were not just Asian. Otherwise, I would never be going out on anything.
Right.
I would certainly not be in that 4% making a living wage.
So you mentioned when not really having that frame of mind when you won the pageant, like you weren't thinking about, oh, I'm representing, or I will be seen that way.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when that hit, though? Like eventually that thought cropped in and was like, oh, someone has said something that I hadn't looked at it that way before.
I remember stepping off the plane in Hawaii, and there were a bunch of reporters and stuff as soon as I got back from the mainland competing, and of course the first question they were saying, so what do you think about representing Asians across the United States now? And it wasn't until then that I thought, oh my gosh, I guess is that what just happened? Is that what I'm doing now? And then all of a sudden it just felt like now I have to be even more perfect than a Miss Teen USA, any other Miss Teen USA was meant to be. I mean, because now all of a sudden I'm representing like this whole race of people that I had no clue I was doing. Even when I was competing, I was like, well, if I'm not going to win, I'm just going to try to stand out. And I remember thinking, well, being that I was only one out of like, I think 3 girls that were in the pageant that was of Asian descent, I thought, well, that's going to actually work to my advantage because I'll be more memorable then.
Yeah.
They're not going to forget who I am because I don't look like anybody else. And so, also representing Hawaii, I think we have the advantage of really sort of playing up the Hawaiian, and I would wear flowers in my hair all the time or fresh flower leis and, things like that just kind of makes you feel more special as opposed to, someone who might be,
from Wichita, Kansas.
From Wichita, Kansas.
I'm from California, actually. I am from California. I just moved here from Wichita.
So yeah, I never felt like being Asian was something that I had to work against until I came to Hollywood. Yeah, and even then I thought, okay, well, there's not many of us around. When I walk into a casting director's office, they're going to remember who I am.
That's awesome.
Well, and you got into the action roles, which
was never my intention. I did not come to Hollywood thinking I was going to be doing martial arts at all.
Did you study martial arts before, or was that a...
No, I didn't do it until after I ran in the Miss USA pageant. I think the first time I went to a karate class, I was 29 years old. So I had a roommate, my roommate Diane Brito, who's still like one of my best friends. She had just gotten her black belt, and I went to her black belt ceremony, and I watched the ceremony, and I remember just being moved to tears. I was so moved by the beauty of martial arts that I thought, I need to do this. And I signed up like the next week.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Weird question I want to ask you. In regards to the Asian culture, and that is the fact that this is going to give me a second here to frame this, Kelly.
I know, Kory, everybody has to be Kelly, so careful Kory. These days.
Well, yeah. The role of Kato has been just about every Asian culture you can think of. Started off as being Japanese, wound up going to being Korean, I believe, then went to being Chinese, then went to being, was it Korean again? No, Filipino. And I think the last representation was back to being Chinese again.
Was this all in one show?
No.
Just over the run of the character.
I've played all of those. I used to call myself the generic Asian. Yeah.
Is that an issue? I mean, because, you all look the same. And I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah.
So do all white guys.
Right. No, I think that...
I'm fat, bald, white guy number 4.
The difficulty of being an Asian actor is back in the day before, when I would go up for Korean roles, Japanese roles, Vietnamese, everything across the board, you had to know like 12 different accents, and you had all of this dialogue that you would have to learn in all of these different languages. And I mean, it was really difficult being an Asian actress back then, because every time you had to play an Asian role, you had to come up with the accent. And I don't know how many, Caucasian people have to do accents, or get asked to do that many different accents.
Right.
It's challenging. It's really challenging. And I think that's why you get, so many Asian actors who get criticized for whatever accents that they're trying to do. I mean, we don't grow up doing, all of these different accents. They're like, oh, and she's supposed to be from Cambodia. It's like, I don't go around practicing a Cambodian accent. Like it's really difficult. And then also, I can't tell you how many times I've had to do dialogue in other languages, none of which I speak, and so later, as people started becoming more woke, they would only cast Japanese in a Japanese role, Chinese in a Chinese role, which also didn't help as an Asian actor, because now you're even more limited as to the kind of characters and roles that you can play. So even though I am of Chinese descent, I don't speak Chinese, and I spoke more Japanese because I modeled in Japan. I grew up listening, around a lot of Japanese, and I studied Japanese in school. So I remember reading for The Last Samurai and doing the audition in Japanese, and the casting director said, I cannot cast you right. And I was just like, what the hell am I going to have to do?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. People get upset when, people don't cast the proper ethnicity, but when they get that specific, it's really tough on us actors.
A friend of mine from the Roddenberry Days 2, actor Vic Chow. I don't know if you know Vic or not. I don't know what Vic is. I don't know what his heritage is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he's Chinese, but I don't know.
Well, Chow could be Chinese, Korean, I think too.
And I've never asked. It didn't come up. I mean, he's done some incredible roles in the years, and he's just my friend, and and you and I going out and freezing our butts off in the water. It didn't matter.
Yeah, it's never an issue.
It's cold,
right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to casting, that's all it's about. Yeah, it has to be very, very specific.
What has to change? What has to change in Hollywood to make this matter?
I don't know. For the longest time, I realized that Asian women were getting cast in roles that, fetishized Asian women. And, I was guilty of being part of all of that because of obviously I just wanted to work. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing until much later. But then I realized also that Asian men were not being cast as male leads. Did you know that James Hong, who is in his 90s now.
90s now, yeah, and still working, I think.
Has never had a lead role in his life.
Are you kidding me?
Has never played a lead role because no one wanted to see an Asian man as a romantic lead or as a lead. I mean, we had Bruce Lee. Jackie Chan is from Hong Kong. Bruce, not many people even realize that he was American. But, other than Bruce Lee, I mean, it was really difficult for Asian men in particular to be able to get cast in roles that did not have anything to do with martial arts. Or the funny guy,
or the geishas, right? in the sweat lodge or the shower, right. Shampoo, whatever.
Right. So
what's it called? I don't know. It's the bathhouse. The bathhouse. I'm sorry.
The bathhouse.
Yeah.
So it was. I think not until just recently that Asian men were getting cast and seen as romantic leads, as being hot guys, and we're not just a boyfriend or husband of another Asian woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I love seeing that. I love that because most of Middle America will, a lot, unless they've traveled or unless they go to big cities or whatever, they may never see an Asian person outside of the Chinese restaurant that they go to in their little hometown, if there even is one. And if they're not seeing Asian men as strong, romantic, sexy leads, they will never see Asians that way.
Right.
They will never see them in that light. And so that's why representation is so important, because people experience things on their television as though it's real life. And that's how you get treated as a community.
Sadly, I think Bruce Lee would have had the opportunity to have helped break down a lot more of those barriers, but
if he wasn't blocked the way he was. Yeah.
I have that feeling, that belief, and I'd love to have this conversation with his daughter Shannon one of these days, if we can get Shannon to pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But because Bruce died in the 70s, and because nobody else was waiting in the wings to come up, I think you've had to start back at the bottom and climb back up. I think so.
Yeah.
And
it was so tragic.
A character like Kato, I think done right could, well, they call it the Kato show in China. It's not the Green Hornet, it's the Kato show.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the reach also of just the character, like the costume. Like Jet Li took it and did it in Black Mask as a tribute. Was the full on Kato costume, even though he was I can't remember what his job was, but he wasn't associated with the Hornet at all. Mm-hmm. It was just like that was his persona. Mm-hmm. Was he took Kato and made him into the hero.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and even as you and I, Kory, have talked about, and we had the conversation 2 shows ago with David Boop and Keith in regards to the costume that Kato was always put in, was in that kind of subservient role as the chauffeur of the waiter around the house. But Bruce was trying to bring it out of that and saying, okay, those were just costumes for the public that didn't know that he was Kato, the super fighter kind of guy. Okay, well, I can get behind that, I guess. It still smacks of that. Let's make
racism. You can say it. Racism.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just time. I think it's just time, and people like you to make this something that we talk about more frequently, and get your backside out there and act more, okay?
I am trying.
Become part of that 4%, okay?
I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us, because that's something we wanted to do really bad.
No, I am so glad to talk about representation. It's so important, and not just for Asian Americans, but for everyone. I think that it's such a difficult time right now, and everyone's so divided that it's really important to talk about this kind of stuff.
Before we wrap up, what are you currently working on?
I am currently working on 3 video games that I'm not allowed to talk about. I know.
Great.
They're also damn secretive these days.
Well, before we let you go, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you for being Stacey Hirano.
Oh,
Phineas
right.
and Ferb is huge in our house, so thank you very much.
And they're back, you realize, right?
I do.
Yeah. It's a great show. It's been such an honor to be on that show, working with these crazy creative guys. I when people find out that I voice that character, it's
right.
always shocking. And it's so fun. It's so fun to see people's faces when they realize that.
It's actually one of the first things I said to Greg when he said we were getting the talk. I was like, "Oh my God, she's on Phineas and Ferb, man!"
Yeah, I feel like 90% of America, who were kids at that time, watched Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah, we were actually introduced to the show when my wife was in labor with our son.
Oh,
we were in the hospital, and my friend came in and was like, "You guys got to watch this show."
And she's like, I am in labor.
So it's a solid memory.
That is awesome. Well, I'm glad that we
Solid.
were able to help bring your child into this world.
Yes, you did.
You don't know them, okay, Kelly? So let's hold back on that just a little. Kelly, I can't thank you enough for
This has been great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
we're excited about having you as part of the show, and let's not make this the only conversation we have.
Please.
Yeah, by all means. And remember, folks out there, that if you are listening and you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, click that ding ding, whatever that thing is.
I don't know
Oh,
if that's
and
the
my
way to say it.
podcast.
Oh yes, let's talk about your podcast.
And my podcast called Shoes Off Inside with Tamlin Tomita and Mei Lee.
I like it. What do you talk about?
We talk about everything from politics to menopause.
I am following that.
We talk a lot about sex, too.
Is that a 4-letter word? Can we...
No.
All right, if you have any comments, podcast at greenhornet66.com. If you do like what you're hearing and you'd like to grease our palms just a little bit, it's ko-fi coffee.com/green coffee, Green Hornet Case Files. And we'd appreciate a little love that way. And what else we got?
I think that's it. I think
Is
we're
that
ready to
it?
rock and roll.
I don't want to go. I'm having too much fun.
It was fun.
Thank you
Thanks so much,
very
guys.
much.
All right, Kelly, Who, and Kory, you ready?
Let's roll.
Aloha.
As the night envelops the city once more, our journey through the hidden alleys of history and valor comes to a close. You've been riding shotgun with the Green Hornet Case Files, where the echoes of the past meet the voices of the present. Tune in again for the next thrilling adventure, where shadows speak, secrets unfold, and the legacy of the Green Hornet continues to inspire. The Green Hornet Case Files is a Grail Productions podcast. The Green Hornet is owned exclusively by Green Hornet, Inc. Until next time, vigilant listeners, keep your wits sharp and your spirit unbreakable.